There we go.
Great. So hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner at Douglas Jackson. And as you know, we help you hire more impactful, diverse leaders who stay for longer and are more successful. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Walton in the Impact Room. Caroline is a board director and executive leader within the financial services industry and an FCA approved person. Caroline has held senior and board level roles, including CEO, NED appointments across the sector for some 20 years, starting out in accounting as a head of finance. Caroline has also been the president of the Consumer Finance Association, a corporate affairs director, chief customer insight officer, and led large legacy financially regulated businesses as well as fintech, startup and scaling organisations. Caroline's also featured in the Women in Credit and Credit 100 and 500. Caroline, lovely to have you here with us today. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. And it's lovely to be here. Gosh, 20 years you said in that intro. It makes me feel so old.
I know, I'm the same. I kept keeping mine to 15 years. I didn't want to say any longer in my industry, but I'm going to have to fess up soon, I think. So let's get going then. I'm really looking forward to this. So as we've mentioned in the intro, obviously you are a successful C-suite professional. You've worked across a number of critical and technical roles, you know, finance, corporate affairs, customer, CEO and commercial. It's not really easy for individuals to use their transferable skills and make that move from one function to another typically. So how have you done it, and what advice would you give to those who want to try?
Wow, do you know, I never set out for it to be that way, which is really interesting. I didn't have a big plan that was, I'm going to do many different roles across the business. I just think I've got a really inquisitive nature and I really enjoy change as well. And I know lots of people naturally don't like change, and so therefore it makes it difficult to go from one role to another and think that you haven't got the skills. I'm a real fixer at heart, and that set me off on I need to seek to understand people before I can make myself understood, I guess, and change, to put change into place. And I think the transferable skills are more from my personality and that natural inquisitiveness than anything else. You know, if you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't feel like a chore, does it? Or it doesn't feel quite as much of a challenge. So when I talk to other people about it, I'm, you know, focus on what your natural ability is. Focus on that being your transferable skills, as opposed to I'm good at finance or I'm, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and I think those are really interesting points. Sorry, I won't cut into you. Carry on.
No, I was just saying that whenever I see somebody who, and I've spoken to people who want to change their career from something that they're doing today to something that they almost think is unapproachable because they have no experience in it. When you sit and write down what your actual skills are, you realize that they're the same skills that you would take to another senior role, for instance.
Yeah, amazing. Those are such good points. And I think that curiousness, I mean, I've literally got a post going out after this Impact Room that talks about one of the top 3 things, I think, you know, for people to succeed and get on is that curious inquisitiveness, which you talk to. And it's so interesting, especially, I mean, we'll talk about diversity some more, but when we look at female leaders, sometimes more than men as well, I'm sure, but females do it more. We hold ourselves back from applying for a role because we don't believe we have those skills for that role so often. Yet you've done that and sort of, you know, traversed all these different functions really well as well. So that's really interesting.
And when you take those transferable skills into the next role, if you did that once and you worked out that actually those transferable skills worked, it builds your confidence to do it again. So it's taking that first step, and that first, is it Sheryl Sandberg, lean in? It's taking that first plunge, isn't it? And once you've done it, you'll realize actually that was much easier than I expected, because I have an inquisitive nature, or I'm really good with people, or I'm able to get to the root of problems. I'm a reflective thinker. There are lots of things that you can be without being an expert in development or an expert in project management. There are other things that you bring to the table.
Yeah, really interesting and fantastic. Great sort of takeouts there. So the other thing that I know that's really probably helped you, and I know is really important to you, is culture. And you know, as somebody that's been a CEO as well as a board member, how do you ensure that the culture that you want flows through the organisation and is felt by all that work there? You know, and that goes right down to the entry and support level staff. Do you think there are some fail safes that are needed as well, and that sorts people should perhaps think about?
I'm a huge believer in having the right culture, and actually I've spent most of my working career in a regulated environment, and at the moment we're all dealing with, in this sector, we're dealing with the first year anniversary of the implementation of consumer duty. And we can be frustrated because it's new and we're trying to embed something that's very all-encompassing across the entire business. But what it's trying to do is create the right culture in an organisation, which is customer focused. But in actual fact, the business should be people focused as well. There should be a real sense of the ability to put your arm around people and understand what it is that is or isn't working well. So absolutely, I sit on a board and policies have to be in place so that everybody understands what's needed, but culture is developed through behaviour. You can set as many policies as you like, but if nobody's interested in how it's being enacted and how people are behaving, then it's just a tick box exercise. In the workplace, I strongly believe that people need to feel safe. They need to feel valued and they need to feel safe. And one of the ways they can feel safe is by observing the right behaviour from the senior team, the leadership team, the executives and the board. If they can see the right behaviour at that level, then it cascades as a sense of safety within the organisation, that there isn't anything untoward happening. We both talked earlier about Simon Sinek before we started, and I think one of his books that really resonates with me is Start With Why. Once the organisation understands why we're here and they feel safe and valued in the environment, then as long as you're behaving the way your policies have been set out, then that will cascade throughout the organisation. If you do nothing, then the organisation will create its own culture and it will come from somewhere in the middle. It won't come from the top, it'll come from the middle, from the people that are maybe competing for positions, and that's what you'll get.
Yeah. And again, really valuable insight. Thank you for sharing. And I think, you know, much of what you've said is where you see a lot of it go wrong, don't you? I mean, sometimes the CEO, they just don't seem present. And, you know, if you talk to people in the organisation, I know they're busy people, but, you know, they don't really see or hear from them as much as, you know, perhaps I think maybe you need to help with that, would you say? Because surely to lead with their behaviours, you need to see and hear more from them and more authentic. Absolutely. Rather than just, you know, a press release or a marketing or someone putting something out from them. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. One of the roles that I had was the CEO of a company called MyJar, and when I took that role, the offices were predominantly in Estonia.
Right.
And this was before COVID. I was commuting to Estonia on every other week, and I just couldn't imagine trying to lead an organisation and not being there. I mean, we did have an office in London as well, so I used to alternate between the two, but I just can't imagine doing a role where you're the CEO trying to set the culture and not being in that environment. Today, we saw the announcement of the new CEO for Starbucks, who's going to be living 1,200 miles away from the office. And I just cannot imagine being able to turn around a business or encourage a business or set the right culture if you're just not present. Now, I think after COVID, the approach now, certainly for me, if I'm approached to look at a particular company, would you like to go and, explore this new role in this company? I'm afraid if I can't go there on a regular basis, it's just a no go now. And maybe COVID's made us a little bit different about being present in that environment as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see how the Starbucks guy, it is a guy, isn't it? Sorry, because you just talked to me about it and I haven't seen the press release myself. I shouldn't have jumped to that assumption, but yeah, it's strange that I did. So yeah, let's see how he gets on. I wish him well, but I mean, obviously it has changed a lot of perceptions, hasn't it? But I know most people are struggling with productivity, performance, and we know there's this shift back to the office coming. But I do think as a leader, and I know, and I'm sure, don't want to speak for you, you can answer, but that there has to be a reason for people to go into the office. It's not just because they have to, but as you say, when you're bringing teams together and when you're communicating more, that if you can get to see people and spend that time with them, and look into their eyes and not just broadcasting at them type of thing, I think that's very important, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's it's hard to get. We all know that it's quite difficult to get that sense from just a Teams call. I don't know if you've ever been on a Teams call where the meeting starts, there's no conversation between the individuals, and then it abruptly ends. Now, if you were in the office, we would be wandering around talking to other people. We'd have a quick chat on the way out. That might even be, a sort of a moment of making coffee and just chatting about life. It doesn't have to just necessarily be about work. So yeah, I strongly believe there needs to be a presence when it comes to setting culture. And if it's difficult to have that presence, then I think it's difficult to manage that culture as well.
Yeah. It made me think, and I'll just share this story with you, because it made me think of someone that told me something recently. So they're big business in the financial services sector. They had a change of CEO, and their previous CEO used to, big team meetings, broadcast at the teams. You could submit questions, but they were pre-screened, so you'd submit questions in advance, and they were obviously selected ones that would go to the CEO. New CEO comes in, live questions, had themselves and the leadership team sat all around the table, like, and just would say, you can take that, I'll take that, you deal with that, and really interacted so differently. And even that was on a Teams platform, but just they had said the difference in the culture and how it made them feel as employees, and their teams was just significant, just as tiny little changes, really, which aren't a great deal of things to do, are they? It's just the really little things.
It's the behavior. It's behavior. Policy sort of sets the grounding, but it's the behavior that makes the difference. And the CEO making the effort to go and interact directly with the people that are looking up to that individual as well. I often say that I believe that the position of a CEO is a privilege. You have something to deliver, but you're also having an impact on people, on the way that they live their lives, even to the point of their families as well. So, I've always felt it's a privilege, and therefore you should make sure that what you are delivering in terms of culture fits the people as well.
Yeah, again, that's another good point. You don't think about that so often. And I don't think a lot of leaders do think about that, because even if you look back, and I'm sure today, I mean, I speak to lots of employers, there is still that mindset sometimes that, people are lucky to come and work here. you know, people are lucky to have an opportunity with this business or brand, and you're like, really? You know, they don't seem to get what you've just said in terms of, you know, that they are, we do all look up to that individual. We are proud to work for the business and the brand, but equally, you know, we want to see that leader and go, you know, he makes me proud, he does the right thing, you know, as well. And I don't think we talk about that as much as we perhaps should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say, when I was at during the COVID time, and we were expecting everybody to work from home. I thought that was a really interesting time as well from CEO. We often, as culturally, it might be thought of as we're allowing people to work from home. So therefore, they should be incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work from home. And I never felt quite like that. I felt it as I'm really grateful that they've got themselves set up in their home environment, because it's I feel like it could be seen as an intrusion on individuals working from home. And it's that sort of thinking in terms of culture and the people in your organization. You are having an impact on the people that work for you. You are in a privileged situation to affect their lives, and therefore culturally I want people to have a good environment to work, to know why we're all here as well. That's super important. Why are we all here, in fact, and setting the right direction, and why we're doing it. Why are we, you know, serving the customers that we serve today? Why are we delivering the financial products that we deliver? Who's going to benefit from it, and why? If the workforce doesn't know any of that and doesn't hear it from the leadership team, all kinds of different cultures can develop, unhealthy ones, obviously.
Yeah,
I suppose certain individuals might not think it's unhealthy if they're having loads of fun.
Absolutely. So another subject that you posted about, which I wanted to talk to you about, was the importance of the role of the chief of staff. And this is another role which varies massively from company to company, and it's certainly not usual in all organisations. But you know, you think it's a good role or crucial for the busy CEO. Would you like to talk a little bit more to that point?
Yes, because I've had lots of conversations with people about being CEO, and I actually, having seen people in that role and been in it myself, I honestly think it should be a job share. I think it can be a very lonely position, and you can get dragged in so easily to day. We've just talked about being with people and setting the culture, but in essence, you need your head above all of that to be able to strategically keep working in the same direction and to encourage your leadership team. So you have to be mentor, you have to be a strategic, sighted individual. You need to be really key on your financial situation. You've got to think about culture and what motivates. There's just so many things. And if you're a CEO, you're likely to have all of that on your mind all of the time, whether you're sat at home with the family or you're in the office or you're on the commute. It's likely that it's on your mind all of the time. And so I often have said to individuals, have you ever thought about having two CEOs so that they can share and encourage each other? And of course, one of the ways that you can do that is having a chief of staff. And I've seen the chief of staff role work really well. And you could argue that the chief of staff could, for instance, be your chief commercial officer or your chief finance officer, operating officer, and that's absolutely true. But if in a very busy organisation where those individuals have also got their pressures on them, a chief of staff can really help glue the team together and really help allow the CEO to do some of the strategic thinking and take things away that might be project driven, and you know, that helps deliver that project when it's shared across a team. So For instance, you might be doing a cost-cutting exercise in the business because your overheads have been increasing, and we often just point at the CFO and say, right, off you go, then go do your cost-cutting exercise. The CFO's got a day-to-day job to do and maybe thinking, right, I'm really stressed, and then the cost-cutting exercise comes across as a very negative experience. If you've got somebody who understands it from different perspectives, then they can come at it with a, look, this is the position that the business is in. Remember what I said about the why when I was talking earlier. This is why we're in this position. It's a good exercise to do. It might free up some more resources. It might help drive the business forward. And so that's almost like a mutual individual who can work on behalf of a group of people. Now, somebody who has a really broad has had a really broad level of experience, like myself, for instance, who's done lots of different roles, has that inquisitive nature. Maybe they're a project manager or somebody who works in a very analytical, but also has some great people skills. They make great individuals to try and drive that change, allowing the CEO to maybe take that step back and do that reflective thinking, that strategic thought, for instance. So I feel actually that it's maybe an undervalued role out there. It's more popular over in the States than it is over here, and it very often seems to have a political, you hear of chief of staff in a political environment. Well, why not have it in businesses readily? I don't understand why it's not as popular as maybe it could be. Maybe you could tell me, Michelle.
Gosh, I don't know. No, I mean, we've had a few of the roles, and we're seeing the role a little bit more than we used to. But as you say, not really as much. But I think the points that you made, certainly around the deputy CEO as well, we're starting to see that a lot more. And I think that's really good as well for succession and sort of bringing in people who perhaps, again, would say, oh, I can never be a CEO, because I think, going off a bit on a tangent really, but I think sometimes if we look at sort of aspirational individuals and getting more leaders into the top jobs and that sort of thing, people feel that the CEO role is beyond them, or they don't want it for certain reasons. But if you've got somebody that's very close to the role and supports them in all those critical elements, it makes it a little bit less daunting for them. They're being educated, trained as well, and hopefully, as you say, supporting that individual in their role equally.
Yes. And remember what we were talking about a little bit earlier, you were talking about it can be quite overwhelming. I think there is nothing worse actually than a CEO that is openly stressed in communication, because what that does is that promotes that unsafe environment that we were talking about. And it starts at the leadership team level. If you've ever sat around a board table or a leadership team meeting and you've witnessed a CEO that's really very openly stressed, what is the conversation that happens when that CEO leaves and the rest of the leadership team are together? They won't be sitting there talking about the latest KPIs or the direction of the business. They'll only be talking about the stress that the CEO is giving off. And that's what promotes that unsafe feeling throughout the organization, and then the focus becomes on all the wrong things. So if the CEO can, and I like your sort of point around deputy CEO, because we have seen a few more of those, to be fair. And I think if a CEO can sort of take a step back and say, I actually could do with a bit of help here. And it's a big, brave thing to say. Everybody's looking up at you and thinks that you're the leader. And all of a sudden you're saying, well, actually, I could do with a bit of help. It's showing a piece of vulnerability, that, isn't it? Which can be quite difficult. But I just think it's important to set the right tone. And if you say, this is the support that we need as a business, and it keeps it operating in the right way, then it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so if we look at tech and AI, especially, because it's all everyone seems to talk about, especially CEOs as well. I think they're all sort of firmly focused on, AI for the future, aren't they? And you, of course, you work for a business that's firmly in the AI sphere at Insio.ai at the moment. And I know they support humans by making the job more effective, which brings about that consistency and support with the customers. So when we look at AI and leadership for the future, what are your sort of thoughts on that?
Oh, Michelle, it's so exciting, isn't it? I don't know if it's just me, but I think AI is really interesting. It is really easy for people to operate life on autopilot. We've talked about this before, you and I, and before you know it, you're doing mundane tasks over and over again, and you can't remember how you completed that job. One of the things I do on a daily basis is I journal write. And if I get to the end of the day and I'm journaling and I can't remember what I did that day, which happens from time to time, it tells me I've been operating on autopilot all day. And I really like the idea of AI taking away the mundane and allowing us to be more present, be more human, be able to connect better, because we're not having to do that day-to-day mundane things. I sat on it must be quite a few months ago now, but I sat on a webinar with a company called Water Cooler AI.
Yeah.
And Simon Sinek was at that, and it was about using artificial intelligence instead of doing surveys of your workforce to see what the mood is, to see how they're feeling. It used AI to sort of navigate its way across and measure the sort of the tone within the business and the culture, using HR platforms or using communication platforms or social platforms.
Right.
And it doesn't say, Caroline said this and Michelle responded in this way. It just gives you a sort of a heat map or tone of how the business is feeling, where you may have areas of attrition developing in your workforce. So Simon Sinek said, I don't really know how AI and leadership, come on, leadership is about people, it's not about artificial intelligence. But then when you think about it, doing a survey, you're not going to get everybody involved in a survey. Some people just, especially those that are disengaged, will just go, nah, not interested. Yeah. But if you're doing it using AI, you're really getting into and understanding what's happening within the business. And then you as a leader can think carefully about where you want to take the human element of it and sit down with people, because you know that there might be an attrition problem in a certain area, and you might be able to measure other things in that area, sort of sickness days, for instance, and start to understand. So that, for me, is where AI is helping in terms of leadership. But for me, it's also about as I said earlier, making the mundane completed so that you can focus on the human elements. And that's where Initio AI is, where I'm working right now. What they're doing is, if you can imagine, in financial services, you've got agents who are completing income and expenditure with people over the phone. These people are usually in financial difficulties, and what's happening is they might be, let's imagine that they're maybe in their 40s or 50s, and they're on the phone to someone very young on the phone who's asking them how much they're spending on the things in their life. It feels a bit judgmental. Yeah. As much training as you might give to that agent, it's still a difficult conversation to have. And the agent is maybe on their 7th or 8th form that day, so they're having to go through it repeatedly, which is a drain on the agent, especially when those calls can be really difficult. Now, what a great example of the way that AI can take that and allow the customer to do that on a self-serve basis using conversational AI. It then allows them to do it without the judgment. They can easily fill it out. There's lots of ways that the AI is helping them get through that form. And then by the time they actually do speak to an agent, we're now in the solution stage. We're now for me, there's a human bit here, which is, I can see your situation. Let's see if we can find some ways to help you. And that for me is a win. That's the best piece of AI I've seen for a part of financial services that is super, super challenging for both agents and consumers. So I'm really happy to be in it.
Yeah, excellent.
Loving it.
And I think you've made the point quite a bit, you know, with regard to that human and sort of technological sort of connection. I think we've all seen terrible tech implementation. We just see over and over and over again because it's just tech for tech's sake, and they don't seem to take into consideration the human, the customer. But you know, that's where the gold is, isn't it? Really, is that opportunity to be better humans, be better with your customers, and then be a better business. Hopefully, that's the gold, I think.
Absolutely. And also I think there's a bit of fear about AI at the moment that it's going to take people's jobs. We won't be able to, you know, before we know it, AI will be doing everything and we'll be sitting at home doing nothing. Of course, I'm sure that there were the same terrors when they introduced motor cars or telephones and televisions and all those sorts of things. But people adapt, and things sort of adapt to our environments as well. One thing I will say about the conversational AI, because I bet we've all had a go on it, is ChatGPT or PT.
GPT, yeah.
We've all had a go, and we have it in our home as well. If you want to have a play around on it, one of the things we did is try and do poems about members of the family. Just tell it a little bit of information about them and then try and see if it can deliver a funny poem. So we all had a good laugh. However, that's sort of the broadest level of conversational AI. When we think about it in the workplace, or in this case as a financial tech tool, it's very narrow and it's very deep. So for instance, it's artificial intelligence, it's learning as it's going along. But what we don't want it to learn is how to make the latest lasagna recipe, or, you know, we don't want it to learn anything outside of I&E. And so there is always a human observation across the top of it, which makes sure that what it's learning is what we need it to learn, as opposed to broadening outside. And I think sometimes that bit's not really understood, and so people become fearful of what it will eventually do.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll see what happens in the future for sure. So cool. And you know, we've talked about diversity. You of course are a successful female leader. You've charted your own course, and across quite male dominated fields as well. If you look at finance, governance, accounting, you know, what do you feel future aspirational leaders or employers could learn, you know, from your journey if they want to achieve what you have, or help others to do so within their organization?
You know, this question comes, the question of diversity comes up quite a bit. And just to take you back, when I was very young, my father said to me, you can be anything you want to if you want it badly enough. But what you didn't mention was that comes with sacrifice, and sometimes it comes with unfair challenges as well, very unfair. And so in my naivety, right at the beginning, I just thought, it doesn't really matter. If you want to be it, you can be it. You just need to. What I didn't appreciate, though, is those levels of unfairness. And I can give you an example of that, actually. When I took a promotion in one of the businesses that I worked in, and a very senior individual in that organisation said to me, as a woman, you do know you're going to have to work harder than the men in this, when you know, in this role. And, you know, it's really sad when I think back to it, because what I didn't say is, how dare you? I was young and I just thought, right, okay, I can do that, don't worry. But it's such a shame that that's the unfair challenges that are faced. And that person didn't mean it out of, you must work harder. It was an observation that person had made of women working in male dominated environments. And I think that's such a shame. Now, I think I hope to goodness things have moved on. But what I would always say is, for those people that are recruiting and thinking about diversity, try not to think of it as just an exercise of making sure you've got that diverse team, which you absolutely need in order to, if your consumers are diverse, then trust me, your team need to be diverse. But also to see further than beyond just that workplace, and look at the sacrifices or the unfair challenges that those individuals that you've recruited might be having, and sometimes I've seen people who should have been at home still in the office, and there is this, we talked earlier about sometimes women think I've got to work so much harder, and that's not true, and we need to stamp that out. We need to get rid of that view, and I've been guilty of it myself, so I know what it looks like, and I know what it feels like, and I know what it feels like after years of doing it as well. It has a real detrimental impact on your health and well-being. So I really urge people to look at the impact that diversity in the role might be having on them as an individual, and how others are behaving around them.
No, go on.
No, I was just thinking then, whether, because when I'm asked this question, Michelle, I can always, I want to advise people who are recruiting, but it's the people coming through the ranks that I worry about. I worry about their ability and the mistakes that I've potentially made in that as well, to, for instance, stick with it. Why don't we go, this isn't acceptable? If these people are not encouraging a diverse workforce, if there isn't an understanding of why I'm here, remember I keep going back to the why, or that I feel safe in this environment, then grab your computer and your stuff and go and look for a job somewhere else. And I think today's workforce, today's individuals coming through are more likely to do that than we were when I was sort of the age of my daughter, for instance. I was sort of like, okay, so you told me I had to work harder, don't worry, I will. That is so wrong.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and as you said, and when I speak to a lot of female leaders who've been successful as you have and made it to the top, I do think a lot of them have that, that grit, that resilience, that determination, that okay, whatever you throw at me, I'm gonna take it and I'll succeed regardless of that. But how many, as you say, have we lost that didn't? And I'm not saying these aren't strong people or strong individuals, but they've just gone, no, this is too much for me. And when we look at diversity, most organizations have got really strong diversity in their junior sort of entry level teams, and we're just losing the people at every rung of the ladder, and it's because of things like what you've said already, and yet to have that diverse leadership, I suppose, then we've got to help remove some of those barriers and that sort of traditional thinking, both from the talent, because they think, oh my God, I don't want Caroline's job. Look how hard she's having to work, as opposed to, what, I can do Caroline's job and I can have a deputy CEO to help me and I can still have a family, and, we can, all these sort of things, rather than turning their back on it, whether it be female or whatever, obviously gender, race, ethnicity and social economic backgrounds, all these things. But the more we can talk about it, make it accessible and available for, as you say, people's lives and understanding what they need, the better, I think.
Totally. You're actually talking, in talking about grit and determination, spot on. That is exactly the environment that I believe existed, sort of go back 15, 20 years. In order to succeed, in fact, I remember hearing it, in order to succeed in a man's world, you need to be more of a man. How wrong is that? And I'm just so pleased that we don't have that now. And what we have is are younger people coming through who hopefully are saying, no, that's not acceptable. I don't know if I've got, I've got 19 and 20-year-olds in our house, and I know for sure that if they thought that environment wasn't right, they'd say, no, that's wrong. And I'm pleased that they can do that today. Let's hope it continues.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, I'm a big advocate for hard work, and as I know you are, hard work trumps talent all of the time, isn't it? But if it's unhelpful and unhealthy an environment, there are other environments that are a lot better. And again, we see so many people leave a career or a function because they associate, oh, I don't want to work in finance, I don't want to work in customer contact, I don't want to work in tech because this is what that job did to me. But it's not. It's that individual leader or that individual culture or that individual company, so it's walking away, but understanding as well that it wasn't necessarily, or don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not always, don't give up on everything. There may be another path to it, and so just keep going for what you want, but accept that it might not be the right environment or an unhealthy one for you.
Yes, totally.
Good, great. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to sort of talk about at all or mention?
There was just one thing that was on my mind when I was thinking about today, and it brought my mind back to something else, because I'm an avid reader, Michelle. You can tell from the books on my bookshelf, but I have a Kindle which is about 3 times bigger than my bookshelf, so it's full. And some of the books that I've read over the years, there's one part of a book that really resonates with me, and it's probably more so in the last 12 months than at any other time. And it's by Stephen Covey, so you're probably well aware of it. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's the 7th habit, which is to sharpen the saw. So if I'm talking to anybody about career or life or just getting to where they want to be, you have to keep resonating back to sharpen the saw. It is, I think the sort of the paragraph is that the chap is sawing the tree and he's been doing it for 4 hours, and if only he stopped and sharpened his saw, he'd get there in half an hour, and we all have to take a step back, get off autopilot, try and be present, make sure we don't lose that human element, take care of ourselves, make sure we spend time doing the things that make us feel positive, so that we're 100% refreshed to go back into work on a Monday morning. It's that sort of thing. And I've learned that. I think I've learned that in some ways in the hard way. So my message is always make sure you're sharpening that saw.
Yeah, we've read that book. I've read that book this year again, and I think I did a post on it. It's a brilliant book, and I'd recommend anybody dive into that. And I think even Warren Buffett, he said the best investment you'll ever make is that into yourself, and and that's key, I think, again, for anybody that wants to get on. He's taking that time and being better, getting better all the time, whoever you are, whatever level you're at.
Brilliant.
Fabulous. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Caroline. Thank you so much for sharing. I've had a lovely conversation with you today, and I'm sure everyone else will really enjoy some of the points and hopefully put some of them into action. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.